Should Christians be on the side of guns? Although I'm not an American, and I can't say that I grew up believing it's my right to bear arms, I can say what I know of the Spirit. God hates what guns represent, and you should too. God could not love guns any more than he could love drones, tanks, or F-16s. After all, he made man to live and not die. He made man to live in peace with his neighbor. Although it is true that man is the one that pulls the trigger, it's also man who puts the trigger into another man's hand. But will banning guns stop the murders in the great American cities? No, murder was here long before the gun. It starts with one man's jealousy over his brother, and murder was born to mankind. But murder, like all sin, starts in the heart. A man can be murdered long before a bullet races through his body. And although a gun is just a tool, like any other tool, which can be used for good or for bad, it's what it represents. Sure, Jesus' disciple Peter carried a sword, but I'm sure Jesus would rather Peter had left it at home when he cut off the man's ear in his last night on earth in the Garden of Gethsemane. I suppose I will never understand how the Christian right can get so worked up about their guns and like silent lambs allow their leaders to take Jesus out of their public schools. Now I know you're going to quote me some aspect of the Constitution about the divide of church and state, but I can assure you God was in all the schools when the Constitution was born and a very long time after. When millions can march on Washington to end wars, rights for abortion and global warming, and gun control lobbyists can put the thumbscrews to politicians, Christians can make some noise too, but noise for Christ, noise to get the Ten Commandments back in the forefront of every school and public institution. Jesus said people must change before kingdoms can. Christians need to take a page out of the liberal playbook if they really want their rights to bear arms. The liberal front is to scream about everything and settle for a little less, a very little less. When liberals cry for gun control, Christians should yell for Bibles back in schools. To a liberal, there is nothing more dangerous than a loaded Bible. After all, the gun never changed anyone's heart, but the Bible changed the world. And unlike guns, it made the world a better place. Men and women who love Christ, children who know Christ and are filled with His Spirit, can hold a gun and never pull its trigger in anger. The Christian right can have their guns when they live in a Christian nation, which was America when they ruled the world. Those who love liberty need to focus on bringing their nation back to Christ. It may take marching like liberals, boycotting like liberals, and making mountains out of molehill like liberals to change the nation. The liberal solution is always to find ways to avoid God's word, so their solution will always be to take guns away. Of course they know that won't stop a single murder, but it allows them to feel like they don't need God. To a liberal, a bad solution without God is better than a perfect solution with God. These are the last days, and it's time for Christians to take the game to the opposition. With horrendous murders trapped in endless spin on the news, it's time for a new spin. The call from the nation's moral majority should be, put Christ back in school, back in state houses, back in every public institution. Then guns will no longer be an issue. Now you may say I sound like John Lennon's song, Imagine, but think like a liberal. Yeah, I said think like a liberal. You don't care how outrageous the goal is, because you know it's the right goal. And there is one great side effect to pushing hard now in the midst of these murders. The one thing you can always say about liberals, they are consistent. They would rather you have a gun in your hand than a well-read Bible. I'm David Whittaker, writer for God for Dummies.